Szenárium, ja, co das. Ja. Jestli tak budete.
Jenom abyste ji viděl.
Dobře, fajn, bezvadný. Vážení hosté, prosím povstaňte a přivítejte mezi námi jeho excelenci, prezidenta Spolkové republiky Německo, pana Joachima Gaucka. Vaše excelence, vážený pane prezidente, magnificence,
distinguished Lord Mayor of Prague, ladies and gentlemen, sorores et patres. It is a great honor for me to welcome to this ancient premises our distinguished guest, President of the German Republic, His Excellency Mr. Joachim Gauck, who will be awarded today during this awarding ceremony the International Charles IV Prize. I welcome members of his escort and all other distinguished guests. It is my honor that I can welcome today amongst us Mr. Jaroslav Kubera, Chairman of the Senate of the Parliament of the Czech Republic, as well as Mr. Růžička, First Deputy Chairman of the Senate of the Czech Parliament, His Excellency Mr. Monsignor Charles Balba, the Apostolic Nuncius, His Excellency Mr. Christopher Israng, Extraordinary and Plenipotentiary Ambassador of the Federal Republic of Germany, and other members of the diplomatic corps. Association for awarding the International Charles IV Prize was established by Articles of Association on the 2nd of December 1992. The prize is awarded by the Charles University together with the capital of Prague to people who clearly foster European and worldwide democracy and humanism in society. This award has the name of the founder of our alma matris, the Emperor of the whole Roman Empire and Czech king, who has virtues such as sense of justice, truth, boldness, faith in God, sense of duty to one's own land, compassion with the suffering people and humanity. And these certainly aren't very much those of the candidate of this prize. His personality is close to us because as a Protestant pastor, he stood on the protection of human rights and freedoms in former GDR, like our President Václav Havel did before 1989. May I now give the floor to Mr. Zima, Rector of Charles University, to tell us more about the history of this particular award.
Honored President, Mayor, Your Excellencies, Magnificences, Spectables, ladies and gentlemen. It's a great honor for me to welcome at our alma matris our dear guests, the former President of Germany, Joachim Gauck, at the occasion of awarding him the Prize of Charles IV. This award, awarded jointly by the Charles University and the Municipality of Prague, is named after Charles IV. Charles IV founded the university, and he also founded the new town of Prague. What's also very important is that Charles IV, building on the ideas of Charles the Great, ruled a multi-language country in which they spoke several languages, and as it is expressed in the Golden Bull, the emperor and all of his people must speak Latin, German, and Czech. This international model was applied at the university as well, which was established for 4 nations: Czech, Bavarian, Saxony, and Polish. Charles IV selected people whom he surrounded himself with, but not based on nationality, but based on their intellectual potential. His chancellor was the German Johann von Neumarkt. Angelus from Florence was from Italy, Archbishop was from Pardubice, Czech Republic, and the builders of the St. Vitus Cathedral were built by a French and a German architects. The Articles of Association of the Charles University are speaking about a table of education everybody can come to, everybody is invited to, and we are hereby inviting our dear guest to be able to award him with the prize and to welcome him at our table. The idea to start awarding Charles IV Prize came to us as soon after the Velvet Revolution. The prize is awarded every other year. So the first person awarded was the French philosopher Pierre Ricoeur, then Karl Friedrich von Weizsäcker, Mstislav Leopovich Rostropovich, Ivan Moravec, and John Foxton Kerr. After 2002, there was a short break in awarding the prize, and yet in 2015, at the occasion of the birth of Charles IV, Henry I received the award. The prize is awarded to men and women who act based on their values and their religion, their hope, their love to others, and people who are there to disseminate good worldwide. Our guest, Joachim Gauck, is one of these people, and therefore we are awarding him with this prize. I remember his presentation at Carolinum in 2014, in which he said, Czech-German relations full of suffering but hope, raising and falling, are at the moment really good. And I should like to add to that President Gauck did his best to improve the relationship in between the two nations. We have the Czech-German Fund of Future Museum of Czech-German relations to be opened soon. And we've got the Czech-German Collegium Bohemium Association. Many university professors are participating at. We feel very close to President Gauck, who worked in former East Germany, and where he supported religious believers and those who were seeking truth. And that's exactly what Mr. John Huss did, and also Martin Luther did. That's why we are awarding him the prize, because his position to migration, his position to helping people coming from war zones is clear. We are very happy that President Gauck did his best to develop relationship in between the two countries, and also contributed to the development of economic cooperation in between the two countries. President Gauck has participated on fulfilling a deep idea which is built into Friedrich Schiller's words, put on music by Ludwig van Beethoven, about people of the world living as friends. People who are friends feel your wings and the motion of your wings. That's why the prize of Charles IV, which will be soon awarded by President Gauck, will be in the right hands. To conclude with, let me congratulate President Gauck to his coming birthday, and wish him good luck and a lot of strength in his life.
Děkuji jeho magnificenci za jeho...
Thank His Magnificence for his presentation, and allow me now to introduce the prize awarded to personalities. And Charles IV wrote in his Moralities, awarded to those who take care, and this is the role of the king, to be at home with his people, like the soul is at tone with the body. Mr. Grip, Lord Mayor, the distinguished participants and guests, ladies and gentlemen. It is a great pleasure for me that the next seventh laureate of the Charles IV Prize is the former president of Germany, Mr. Joachim Gauckovi. As former Lutheran pastor and preacher, he was known for his commitment to human rights in German Democratic Republic. This award actually symbolizes our gratitude for his courageous and bold positions, for the excellent way in which he performed the office of the president. And I would like to appreciate his contribution to Czech-German relationship. I appreciate that during his term of office he visited our country several times. He was the first German president to come to Lidice to bow to the memory of the victims and took part in the celebration of the 25th anniversary of Velvet Revolution. All these are important and inspiring steps in his effort to come to terms with historical responsibility. Like the rector said, the prize was established in 1993 as an award for personalities whose cultural, scientific and political attitudes contributed to European or universal value. And I'm very happy to be able to pass this award to a personality who indisputably contributed to human rights, played an important role in unification of Germany at the beginning of the 90s, and which at the present, or who is a person of outstanding moral integrity. Thank you. Thank you, Lord Mayor, for introducing the personality of the President. And it's good to have another quote from Charles IV's Moralities, which says, "Happy is the man who at the end and beginning of the day is found working and who receives from the world nothing than what he really needs, and who does well, good, and prevents evil." May I now ask His Excellency Mr. Joachim Gauck to kindly take over the award. May I also ask Mr. Hašek, Director of the Unit for Public Sector of the Czech Savings Bank, to kindly hand over financial reward, which is part of the prize, and a quote from Charles Moralities, how good and useful it is to do good to those who deserve it. Your Excellency, may I, in my own name and on behalf of all the Assembly, to congratulate you on being the laureate, and may I give you the floor.
Magnifizenz, sehr geehrter Herr Oberpräsident, Spektabilitäten, sehr geehrte Damen und Herren, liebe Freunde, was für ein schönes Déjà-vu ist das heute. Bevor ich meine Rede anfange, wie schön, dass meine finanziellen Verhältnisse so geregelt sind, dass ich die wunderbaren 10.000 €, die ich geschenkt bekommen habe, hier für Zwecke der deutsch-tschechischen Verständigung spenden kann. Wäre ich Wäre das jetzt 40 Jahre früher gewesen, hätte ich das Geld natürlich nötig gebraucht. Meine Damen und Herren, ich bin voller Freude und Dankbarkeit darüber, dass ich erneut in diesen ehrwürdigen Hallen inmitten der goldenen Stadt Ihr Gast sein darf. Ihnen, Herr Professor Sima und Herrn Oberbürgermeister, danke ich gleich mehrfach für diese ehrenvolle Auszeichnung, für Ihre würdigenden Worte,
Thank you very much for your words of appreciation and acknowledgement, and thank you very much for inviting me to Prague in winter, because last time I was here in my capacity of the president, I wasn't here in winter, and I was here in my capacity of being a president, so I couldn't really see much of Prague, unfortunately. So this time, visiting Prague, I could walk in the steps of Charles IV and see everything what makes Prague so special culturally in the religious context, but also in the architectonic concept. I would like to walk with me through this city and perceive how precious this is what we gained 30 years ago. But the history is much longer and much richer. It's about Europe being together, Europe being free, Europe living in solidarity, in democracy, in liberal relations. My walk through Prague starts here at the old Carolinum, right around the corner, right opposite of the Estates Theatre. You see the Gothic archway, and the Gothic archway, that's a part of Jan Rothlev's mansion, which dates back to the establishment of the Charles University. 40 years after having been established, the university professors started teaching here at these premises. Charles IV was a true European, German and Roman emperor, Czech king. His father was a Luxembourg, and his mom came from an old Czech family. Alma Mater, Carolinum, was established by Charles IV as the first university in Central Europe, after one German university. And in Prague, Charles IV believed he needed to establish this university to welcome scholars. I know you all know that, but I have to stick to the text which I have in my hands. The Poles, Czechs, people from Bavaria, Saxony, etc., they all had the same rights and responsibilities, and they were taught in Latin, and they also had their national groups. When I first visited the university, I quoted that as an example of something what should come without saying today. 650 years ago, it was not about national groups. It was about talented people studying here. Thanks to different European programs, for example, Erasmus, there are many graduates coming to this building every year, receiving their diplomas in here, and their nationalities are very variable. These people come from different, their own story, and the beauty is in their combination. You see all these styles combined, all these cultural elements brought together. It's like music. Only when orchestra is playing together, you get the right music. And what that comes to my mind when I look at European integration. A lot of elements of European integration must be renovated, and it's the same as with paintings. Paintings also have to be renovated, and each epoch actually leaves traces with its style and buildings get rebuilt, but what's left there carries its own story. Again, it's like an orchestra playing music, playing a symphony. These beautiful buildings were built and became a part of the integral entity of Prague. And that's the same with European Union. With the European Union, there is a lot of variety in there, but there is a lot in common as well. And there's always something to improve and something to be reconstructed. But we shouldn't forget that this whole entity and I'm sure that the European Union will also, and you fill that gap with a new building, and I hope that the European Union, once there is a gap the European Union is now facing, will be able to uphold its integrity. So what comes to my mind when I'm looking at the Old Town Square? Beautiful buildings, of course, but in the middle, you've got a huge monument of John Huss, a very symbolic monument by Ladislav Šalon. And it is about John Huss and his death for truth. Once rector of this university, John Huss symbolized the academic ideal of his times. He set himself free from the academic ties, and he became one of the speakers for freedom. John Wycliffe also contributed to his thoughts. And he felt that his consciousness gave him the strength to tell the truth and to promote his own interests as well as the Czech interests, which he was also trying to apply with Charles IV. And one of his activities was to make all the nations equal. It was very modern, and very helpful for the future development. We see that this university's history is very complex as the history of Europe. Charles University had its ups and downs in the past, and the same is true for Europe. Sometimes it was dividing nations, sometimes was unifying nations. Those of us in this room who are a bit older will remember that under the totalitarian regime, the university was far from free. I remember this, you remember this, and this experience definitely cuts across the borders. Ladies and gentlemen, if we continued walking through Prague, we would probably come to Franz Kafka's square, looking at St. Nicholas Church. Maybe we would have a cup of coffee at Kafka's house. And Kafka is the mixture of Czech, German, and Jewish culture so characteristic of Prague in the 30s. Kafka, and we know that Kafka was a part of something what had been taken away from us, and but he symbolizes a certain period which was followed by very dark times, annihilation of the Jews and all those crimes of the Second World War, which ended this symbiotic culture in the very heart of Europe. Kafka felt that the dark times were coming, but he died before it came to it. But what happened after 1945 was also far from good. The transfer of Sudeten Germans, is it ethnic cleansing or whatever you call it? That's yet another quite dark period of the history of Czechoslovakia. We should keep that on our mind, and we should also keep on our mind that we have to come to terms with that. And coming to terms with history means understanding history in its good and in its bad as well. And we have to keep looking for reconciliation, and we have to continue together, as Václav Havel used to say. Václav Havel used to say that we should live in truth, and if we do live in truth, we will find ways of living in reconciliation. I am happy that this path had been walked by others before me. Ladies and gentlemen, my virtual walk through Prague is not over yet, because I'm coming back to the Old Town Square now.
But all that arise in front of me is not always the pleasant thing. We can see cannons of the Soviet tanks from August 68, Socialist Brotherhood under leadership of Moscow, terminated what for many people, not only in Czechoslovakia, was a symbol of hope of reform, which would restore the basic civic rights, the freedom of speech, freedom of assembly, and also freedom in doing research in culture and arts. And truly, I was enchanted by what I heard from young Czechs, namely how different the atmosphere then was. A brand new wind, about 100 young people told me that there were demonstrations which resulted in killing. The leadership of the Czechoslovak state was under control, and Soviet rulers and soldiers found their home here. Defeat of the Prague Spring initially they destroyed illusions of those in Central and Eastern Europe in opposition, but it did not erase totally the hope for freedom. And those who hope in freedom must never forget about Jan Palach, the student who on the 16th of January 1969 burned himself to death. He too is symbol of freedom, and it is here and now that we should remember his act. Thank you, Dean and Rector, that together with me you have emphasized this, and the funeral of this student all these years ago was a demonstration, and he became a symbol for people who were hoping in freedom in Czechoslovakia, and that was actually the basis of Charter 77. And then on the 17th of November at Wenceslas Square in 1989, thousands of demonstrators came to hear the political appeal of Václav Havel and Alexander Dubček. Autumn 1989 means we remember various names. Today, this is called the Velvet Revolution. Some refer to it as a peaceful or singing revolution. This was in GDR, really. But in spite of the different naming, most important is what we had in common here in Dresden, in Prague, or in Budapest. There were dozens of years of experience of lack of justice and rights in opposition to a couple and lawlessness of majority. That is to say that there is a state of affairs which makes you helpless, and what combines is indescribable happiness when you achieve freedom. 30 years ago, we protested against the communist regime in favor of freedom and democracy. That was what united us, and we should stay united and go against the attempts to slender democracy or revive the ancient model of nationalism. Ladies and gentlemen, my walk through Prague is limited in time, or that we would really continue the walk through and find more witnesses of our common cultural heritage, Europe of poetry, Europe of criticism, Europe of science, Europe of faith and enthusiasm, Europe of great projects and elegance, achievements and success, freedom and spirit, Europe of new democratic coexistence. There are many lights, but also dark shadows. And as for our collective European mind, we know that light goes together with shadow. Europe, which should be maintained and preserved, because these are values which proved their worth over centuries, and this is the basis of Europe. In this respect, I receive the honor of the reward. I take it as my task to strive for Europe of freedom and democracy, respect of human rights and solidarity. Thank you wholeheartedly.
Děkuji panu prezidentovi za kleine Spaziergang durch Prag a také za jeho vyznání k univerzitě, demokracii a svobodě. Chtěl bych to dovodit Karlovou moralitou, jež charakterizuje jeho osobnost. Jak dobře je lidu,
Let me quote again how good the fares the people whose king can make judgment and take decisions and knows what he should know, and how poorly off is the people whose king lacks any of these. I think this is really valid till today.
Nás nyní pozval zemlínského kvartetu.
Let me welcome now Zemlínský quartet who will play the American quartet by Antonín Dvořák. Let me extend my thanks to the musicians for this beautiful artistic experience. As the German reformer Martin Luther says, music is one of the most beautiful and the most splendid gifts of God. Tunes give life to words, and music drives away sadness from your soul. Your Excellency, dear President, dear guests, thank you very much for your participation at this festive awarding of the Charles IV Prize. Before I part company with you, I should like to welcome you to Joachim Gauck's presentation. 30 years after revolution in Central and Eastern Europe, united in freedom and democracy. The presentation will be delivered here at 4:30. Today's meeting I should like to close by Charles' moralities. How can we compare the deeds of those striving to be consistently helpful to those who crave lust and glory? Ladies and gentlemen, let me part company with you by quoting Cicero and wishing you the following. Mr. President, please attach your signature to the Charles University Memorial Book. And ladies and gentlemen, please be invited for a toast at the adjacent wall.
Vaše excelence, pane prezidente, vaše magnificence,
distinguished students, welcome to the lecture given by President Joachim Gauck. It is scheduled for about 15 minutes to be followed by question and answer session. And of course, then the media, they will be invited to ask questions. I would like to ask His Excellency, the President, to present his speech. Dear students, ladies and gentlemen, 15 minutes, well, that's not enough for me. I have prepared much more. All right, we'll see. Never mind. We'll see whether you will stay. If not, you will simply go. In 1898, we had a logo, "We are the people," and we are sick of the matters as they are. All right, but let me start now. Let me first express my pleasure at speaking here today. I received the Charles IV Prize today. I appreciate it, so I'm full of joy. When I was visiting here as a president, I also received some awards, but if you receive Charles IV Prize, well, that's something very unique. But together with you, I would like to share my experience. This is a meeting I value highly, so may I invite you to the walk tour of 30 years development in Europe. By way of introduction, let me give you a very simple answer. Let me say that you don't expect me to give you a simple answer, or I hope so, but we hopefully that will trigger some thought. A couple of days ago, we terminated the year when you and the Slovaks celebrated 100 years of existence of Czechoslovakia. The important thing is that your national state was born in European modern times, and the national philosophy, which we may call ancient, but no, this is a fairly new and modern phenomenon, and we never think about it. We believe that this has been here since times immemorial. Czech statehood was part and parcel of the disintegration of the Habsburg Empire. Czechoslovakia obtained independence, and in the West, the First World War left behind itself memory of the greatest disaster in history. Our perception was different, however, because new national states appeared, and Germany in 1919, after losing the war, disappeared, while in Czechoslovakia and other areas or regions of Europe, new states were formed. We know that the Czechs and Slovaks repeatedly lost their independence and self-determination. Twice in the 20th century, and twice had to strive back for it. It was occupation, Germany during the Second World War, followed by the Soviet control until 1989. And then in 1992, the federation was dissolved and two independent states appeared, Czech and Slovak republics. And truly, all this was about hope for independent national state, and it is a part of your DNA that the Czechs, not the only country in Central and Eastern Europe, till today view the relationship to other states with, so to say, vigilance, although they may be friendly and based on partnership, and although they, so to say, willingly joined EU. After Second World War, the European Union was a grandiose project of peace and future of the whole Western Europe.
Your parents, your grandparents, they were watching it from far. They were watching what was going on in the west of the borders. After '89, after the anti-communist revolution, the older people, us, the older people, could do what we had been dreaming of, what we were longing for. We all wanted to be a part of Europe. We wanted to to enjoy Western world values, freedom, peace, democracy, the rule of law, and also we wanted to be well off. But with just one single breath of history, and this everything for Europe suddenly became a problem. Back in 2004, 10 more Central and Eastern European countries joined Europe, and in 2005, majority of the French and Dutch rejected the European Constitution and enhancing of the European unification. All the points of criticism which we hear from various sides come from Europeans who are criticizing the seemingly dominant Brussels, Brussels having more powers than necessary, as they say. There is this anonymous and often arrogant bureaucratic power, bureaucratic elite in Brussels, which decides about things people had never voted for. So there are larger states which are more influential than smaller states, and the larger states, that being Germany as well, people fear that they will be held responsible for things they had never caused. In essence, the conflicts revolve around the national versus supranational level, individual national states and European institutions. At one end of the debate, we've got one group of people who call for ever closer union, and they want the United States of Europe one day. But on the other hand, you've got people who are much less willing to be unified. They want Europe to be a kind of coordination point for nation states only. I hope that Europe will agree on a third option, a third possibility, which is only seemingly contradictory to the European idea. Hopefully it will be a bridge in between European Union and the concept of the national state. Hopefully there will be some regulation on one hand, but also more freedom for the national states on the other. For a long time, politicians in the West have been neglecting the nation state. In Germany, for example, my home country, the feelings were that the national state is a kind of anachronistic thinking. On the other hand, national state meant aggression, xenophobia, and dominance to us. I should like to speak about how I first traveled to the West in the 70s. That was during the Berlin Wall. You couldn't travel anywhere, but if you had an urgent family matter, you could travel abroad. So at the end of the 70s, I actually had this chance to travel abroad. I come from Rostock, actually. And that was surprising because I went to Hamburg, and in Hamburg they kept telling me, we come from Europe, we don't come from Hamburg. And I realized that the national state for Germans meant something wrong. It felt to me that Germans didn't want to talk about national state because it's so obsolete, it's so outdated. young people didn't want to sing the national anthem, and the flag that didn't really mean anything to them. People were really very foreign to national feelings. Nation that didn't mean much to young people then, really. And that's why people were so thrilled about a kind of a post-national setting, and scholars spoke about post-national democracy as well. It was a very important lead thought in political debates of those times. For people who newly discovered the value of nation, it's very important to realize that in the West, many people until recently had been very negative about that. But let's go back to my text, actually. Oftentimes in Germany, we didn't want to see that Germany provided for protection for people, and that people just want to be home somewhere. And in the post-national thinking in the West, it wasn't actually present. People, those who lived east of the Iron Curtain for 50 years, they are very different from those who lived in the West. In the West, people don't recognize themselves as the West. But we still recognize the Westerners as the West. We were thrilled about them. We were thrilled of becoming a part of one with them. From Tallinn all the way to the Balkan borders, everybody shared one wish, and that was be the same as the West. These days, it's different. European Union has a constitution, a basis, a very basis, which is common for everybody in the European Union. But on the other hand, we should recognize as unique what is unique. Central and Eastern Europe, for example, has had very little experience with foreigners since 1945. You know, why shouldn't we accept people who wish to live here with us? The French, for example, they've got very long experience with migrants, with immigrants, and step after step in Germany and France, economic migrants have received their place within the society. What changed? Life in cities changed, life everywhere changed. Now, in these countries, people feel that foreigners are not a threat anymore. When you come to Germany, you will see a big difference there. It's one big country, but there are differences, still differences, in between the East and the West. And of course, Western Germans feel differently about the Eastern and vice versa. In East Germany, there are very few immigrants there, actually, but the resistance against them is much higher because people there are very resistant against things they don't know. You can't say that East Germans are less human. It's just they just identify with different things, and their life experience is different. And what is also different is that we learned to live in the civil society in the Western part much earlier. We learned step after step how to become citizens. We humbly accepted being citizens. In the East, they must learn how to do that. For West Germans, it was very interesting to watch how East Germans reacted to the flag, for example. Many intellectuals felt that this could be new nationalism. We are all global citizens. We don't want these chanting of Germany, Germany, and swearing by the German flag. If you don't come from Germany, you can't imagine it. From the Czech Republic, maybe you feel bad about it. It's got a lot to do with German historical memory. We are a generation that refused nationalism because we knew that nationalism ended up badly with Hitler and all that. But sorry, I had to detour from my text because there are things out there which I need to explain based on my own experience. I've seen it with my own eyes. Okay, as to the future development in Europe.
These the different experiences will have to be pacified, and this brings me to the next page of my paper, which says that the differences there are doesn't mean that we will insist on being different, but we will respect our experience and not give up constructive criticism. That would be unreasonable. It is not only permitted but desirable as well. And if there is something wrong both with the national state, such as the current argument about the draft budget of the Italian government or on the part of European Union, it is not really interference with inner matters. It is democratic and legal duty in the for the benefit of the whole community. The treaties which we have signed that must be respected and maintained. Europe will soon, in a couple of months, have elections for the European Parliament, perhaps the greatest stress test ever since its foundation. Practically in all the countries, you would have right-wing, left-wing populist parties whose preferences are growing, and some even are members of the part of the government. And one country is about to leave EU, and things like rule of law, division of power, freedom of opinion, and being true to conventions and agreements and duties arising from debt. That's with us. And a drastic example now is migration policy. No constructive cooperation with all the member states of EU has as yet not been achieved. And all this takes place while in international environment many more important things are changing. Say China, extremely dynamic economic development there. And they, of course, have ambitions for being world power in Africa and Europe, expanding their sphere of influence. And Russia, not only that violated sovereignty of neighboring states and occupied other countries' territory, but has identified itself or demonstrated itself as a partner in Middle East or East in the East. And this way we may, and as they lose confidence which they try to build over the years. Turkey, member of NATO, of course, due to its authoritative president, it's unpredictable, but it is near it is in our near neighborhood, and Europe is also confronted with the danger of rooting of the established world order. We can't depend on that anymore. Some European political parties follow their own course in foreign policy. Some try to, so to say, establish links to Russia and China or President Trump. And this is then quite discouraging due to the forces of separation in Europe. And what is spreading now are egoistic national interests, and the flagship of Europe is still continuing along its course. But many people in Europe are frightened. Although we have got many analyses and studies and discussions, of course, the preferences of EU are as high as never in the past 30+ years. The figures may differ, but I'm glad to be able to say this here in Prague, because what I'm going to say you won't like. 85% of the citizens of Luxembourg consider EU as a positive phenomenon. In Europe, it's 60%, while in the Czech Republic, the preference is only 34%. And this is the lowest single level of preferences in Europe. And ladies and gentlemen, if you are the age of my grandchildren, I wish that this percentage will increase. But let me still ask for a bit of attention. I mentioned the Czech Republic, but what we see going on in your country is quite unique. 34% were confirmed by the statistics. About 62% of Czechs in a poll survey said that they profited or benefited from EU membership. So we do not, we can't say that we do not prosper, but we feel miserable. Same in Germany. People's feelings would differ, which is quite surprising. And if you, young people, consider the situation in your country, the positive economic situation for employment, the connection with Europe, then you would see that membership in EU was profitable for you, and being neighbors of Germany is in no way dangerous, but economically most beneficial, and offers plenty of economic advantages. And the existing relationship would not be conceivable without membership and friendship under EU. So, what should we do now? Those who support the European matters, let's not listen to them who are afraid of national identity. Let not the politicians abuse these fears. It is obvious that if you have responsible politicians, you often hear them speaking in a very populistic way. And what we need today are politicians who would be aware of the need of prosperity. And we are aware of the benefits, and we want to preserve these benefits for future generations.
Let me ask you now to look at Portugal, for example. Try to Google Portugal, try to look at the situation in that country. EU border countries, Portugal, Ireland, how did these countries do before they joined the EU? They were really poor. The situation was horrible there, and look at them now. Look at them now, look at the luxury of life in there, and look at the political culture in there. But let's come back to us, to our tasks. Naturally, when I'm talking here in Prague about the Czech Republic and about Germany, I must speak about the fact that in Germany we have a populist party as well, and there are many people in Europe and in Germany who fear that national identity is under threat, and then join parties like this. And it's often so, and we don't see it in Germany only. We see populist parties in other countries as well, and people voted for them not because they wanted to implement their anti-European policy, but they voted for them because they were angry with the European policy. And they were angry with their politicians, and they wanted something new, somebody new, and they expressed it by their vote. But these parties they voted for are not alternative. They don't know what they want from Europe in the future. What they know is that they need to tell the voters that they will take care of them, and the voters want to be taken care of. As to the European elections, European parliamentary elections, I really want more competition there. I would like to see the elections going in the right direction. We need to think about what we want. Do we want to follow Macron? Do we want increased speed? V4 sees that differently, as you know. Maybe we will need a year or two before we decide what path should be taken and how EU should look like. Should it be a union of individual countries, as de Gaulle used to say, or should it be different? And all people, especially young people, are very important in this debate. I can't say that I can close my eyes to problems which must be tackled globally. There are global problems which can be solved by individual states. It's changing of climate, migration flows, digitalization, cyber safety. With the new digitalization coming, the mankind will change. Plus, you have security issues as well, and those issues cannot be tackled by individual countries alone. Even Germany cannot tackle it alone. We have to adopt common measures for small as well as big countries. We need tighter cooperation. We need common decision-making. This is what I want when we are talking about how to tackle migration issues, for example. We can't fulfill 100% of the European Union's decisions, but on the other hand, lack of solidarity from V4, it's not a solution either. And we should talk about solidarity in this field. How to express solidarity with immigrants. Do we have enough maneuvering space for the coming future? What's also important in this respect is that those who will be leaders will have to say out loud that the situation is difficult, that we have to control immigration, that we don't want, and you don't want that either, to erect internal borders. I don't know what to say. What can happen next? Changes won't come on its own. They will not come without our contribution. We need to talk about them. We need to contribute to them. We need to talk about defense policy. We need to talk about new defense structures. We need to talk about NATO. Is NATO obsolete? Do we need a new alliance? Some in Europe would like to remove NATO, but if we gave up on NATO, that could be really detrimental to us. We would be at mercy of those who may not have good plans for us. Europe and Europe's success will be measured by our ability to make people be free of their everyday problems. You know, there are many people in Europe who don't know how to make ends meet on the everyday basis, and these people must be helped. We need to balance living conditions in various countries of the EU, Czech Republic, Austria, Germany. We don't have a problem with high unemployment amongst young people as they have it in the south. We don't have problems with academic education. But we just can't say, down South Europe, that's your problem. No, we cannot do that. We have to describe the situation there and say that we need to express solidarity and we have to help them. We have to fight together. There are lots of tasks ahead of us which we can refuse. We cannot refuse them. We can't say that good days of Europe are over with. No. People need to be free to decide, but we need to support them in that respect. We shouldn't forget that EU is a union based on solidarity. Sometimes countries should agree even with measures which are maybe not that popular in their country, but these measures are there for everybody. And it would be very negligent if we just adopted what we want to adopt. We don't want the EU to erode. Of course, national states want to have their national governments, but if you are a member of an alliance, you have to realize that the alliance is there for the benefit of everybody, for us. It is important to have European values. The national dimension, if the national dimension becomes stronger than the supranational dimension, that would be bad. We all have our own experience, and we know that supranationality also contributes to national interests. And I'm very happy that Czech Republic has been a good partner to the European debate. You're a strong and valid partner. I underline that if there are states or groups of states which robustly stand for their interests, defend their interests, it's fine, but it shouldn't escalate pressure. If you're negotiating, you have to show that, yes, you're fighting for your interests, but finally you will adopt a compromise. You will adopt solutions which are good for European democracy. Those who think that they must promote 100% of their interests, they are not right. Making compromise, it's not about being weak, it's about being wise. And if not all countries want to cooperate, then we have to talk about what will happen next. We cannot postpone reforms. There are countries, and for example, France, our neighbor. We are now working about an agreement in between the two countries, and we can see how many problems postponing reforms have caused us. Problems in Italy, problems in Greece, political figures in there who are pushing it in a very different direction. But there are people out there who've had positive experience with reforms, and they should speak out loud about their positive experience. politicians, parties, movements, when they start violating democracy, they anticipate a different rule. I ask myself a question of what do they want? Do they want to limit pluralism? Do they want to limit the rule of law? I don't know. In some parts of Europe, liberal democracy is facing a big test, and it will have to prove itself in this test. Liberal democracy, to me, is open society. Democrats who want to have open democracy, people like Charles IV, really. If we look at countries which say no to liberal democracy, and if they succeed, Europe will not be what we want. We've seen it in the past in Europe. We've seen governments which were built based on the vote of the majority, but there was no further protection. The majority then had very bad impact on the goings-on. You know, in Europe, majority of people voted for people like Hitler, and if we are creating democracy, we should, or if we want democracy to be here, we need to talk about values. Values democracy is built on, not only about free elections and secret ballot. We need to protect our democracy. We need to defend its liberal roots. And whenever and wherever democracy is being attacked, we have to raise our voice and say no, strictly. I am nearing the end of my presentation.
We will not be ever in a world where we would be kind and comfortable, because there is always a question of how much funds go to this country or that country or this project or another, and we won't be united on issues like distribution of migrants. It could be interesting in the Central and Eastern European countries to compare your experience. It is a fact that your economy without migration would really have been in trouble. So those in society who are afraid of emigration will see that if we want to be competitive, we need migration. Now, what do I long for? I would wish that we have the discussion which would lead to stabilization. That is to say, that you and us will take part in the discussion, not be just observers, that we will simply come and say, these are our expectations, this is what we think about the role of nations and Europe. Only when governments are insecure or had very complicated majority rule, which does not facilitate true decisions and implementation of some paradigms. There we need civil society, active civil society. We knew this from the times of oppression. That is to say, the citizens created small groups first, but then they became a major social power. We need active citizens. We need strong civil society, which would be able to correct the political leaderships. Now I have some expectations as well, and it is a big one. You should follow what's going on in America, in Silicon Valley, but you should be there to experience it properly. You have other tasks which are equally challenging, which claim your strengths, your imagination. I would wish that my homeland would be part of a community of free Europe, where we have good values for a common future.
Herzlichen Dank für Ihre aktuelle Rede.
Thank you very much. And now the questions. Question from the floor.
Prosím. Tamhle prosím, vidím, ano, první dotaz.
First question. You will get the microphone.
Dankeschön. Also ich bin
Thank you.
Doktorandin an der Fakultät für
I am a doctoral student here at Charles University. I would like to thank you very much for your very inspiring lecture. You mentioned the differences between the East and West, between Eastern and Western Europe. And you also mentioned issues on which we stand apart. And you said that we should rather look for something uniting. And you said that we should strive for something like common identity of Europe. Identity is also about common history, common memory. And that's why I would like to ask, what common memories of what should we have? What are the matters that we should remember? What should be the values and ideals uniting those in the East with those in the West? Well, I will try to answer straight away. Its identity is not an easy concept. I told you about Germans of my generation living in the West. They said, yes, I am at home in Hamburg, and therefore my homeland is Europe, because to be a German for them was something awful, violent and Holocaust. Awful, really. When I was your age, I hated my own country. I was, ashamed of what they did, simply terrible. Many people had similar remembrances of the perpetrators and murderers and victims as well. And we have plenty to remember. Germans, after the war, tried to forget about it all, and it failed. And then they entered the stage of self-criticism. They discussed their guilt, and they admitted the sadness and sorrow and shame. And only in this way they advanced further and were able to feel as a nation. It's easier for the younger generation and not for those who were the victims of the evil times. For the young ones, it is always better to have something like common strive for something great, something European. We are meeting in a country celebrating 30 years since the fall of the Iron Berlin curtain. And people who lived in this country, who longed for freedom, although they spoke different languages, had this as common denominators, although the older ones would say they are Germans, you must never trust them, be on your guard, while there were Germans who said we were driven out, we can't trust those who caused it. So who was the guilty and who was the victim? And then the discourse of what we have in common started. What failed when nationalism was born. It was Germany, but not only Germany. And then you appreciate the beauties of the European institutions. You see all the generations of your fathers and forefathers, your grandfathers had to wage war. Nobody from my generation, this is something that the older generations can hardly imagine. It's incredible that we have no war today with our arch enemies, which are the French, of course. And that's why it's admirable that this peace is stable. And therefore, there won't be anybody who would come to combat for his own nationalism, that is to say, turn international friendship of nations into the enmity. So intellectuals should not only present themselves or feel of themselves as Czechs, Germans or French. We have yet another identity. We are all Europeans. And some of us say that's not enough. I know people in Japan, in America or in Korea, and I understand them perfectly well. If we discuss human rights, that's another identity, national identity, European identity, and I would think that there are people that I have so much in common wherever they live, in whatever continent, and share the same values as long as law is law and human rights are rights.
Ich würde Sie gerne anregen, zu 6 Sätzen sagen.
I would like to ask you for 6 sentences which could help us continue in our thoughts. It's we are celebrating the anniversary of the Versailles Conference. It was a very asymmetric conference. There was no balance there because there were losers there and there were winners there. And after the war, Germany didn't have a good position. But after the Second World War, the Marshall Plan helped Germany raise again to be reborn from ashes. And I feel that the Western society was born thanks to the winners being willing to take Germany on board. And Germany was invited to participate on prosperity, and I was an immigrant as well. And young generation, we were happy to be recognized as valid people. It was not negating German identity, just the opposite. It was about being thrilled about being German. And I'm very happy that you've said what you've said. After the First World War, the German nation felt that they were real losers. And if a nation feels like losers, the losers want to retaliate. The losers become aggressive. And that's what happened in Germany after the First World War. There were Democrats there who wanted to fight for peace, for peaceful solutions, but there were other politicians there who kept saying Germany has gone through a lot of bad things, and we've been diminished, and then what happened. And then after the Second World War, and I very much appreciated the Western powers created Marshall Plan and invited West Germany to be a part of it. They didn't react only to the fact that Germany lost the war. They didn't want to retaliate. No, they tried to be above it. You know, what happened, what was caused by Germany during the war, real horrors, and it could have ended up badly. They could have been, Germans could have been rejected by the Americans, the Brits, the French, but these countries decided not to retaliate, forget what happened, and to try to help Germany raise economically again, to become a part of the world which is progressing. Marshall Plan was necessary because populists would have taken the lead otherwise. And this new experience with democracy came to its limits. Some older German people felt that it wasn't going to work out. Some people Europe-wide felt that in Germany they were just pretending being Democrats, that something wrong was going to happen. And this trust given to Germany by other people, that's a precious thing, and it was a great investment made after the Second World War that actually rid the Germans of their thoughts to retaliate. In the East, we had a real problem because 12 million people were transferred away from their homes, and there were revisionists in there, but it was far from what we experienced after the First World War, when the policy became very aggressive. So thanks to Marshall Plan, Western Democratic Plan proved to be better. The Soviet Union, they always wanted to dictate everybody and everything. If you want to dictate people, if you want to rule their lives, that won't work. That society will work only for a limited period of time, and that's what happened to the Soviet Union. A brief question from the press, if I may, just real brief, please. I'm sorry, my answers are actually very long. Christoph Naumann. I'm from Ackermann's Association, Czech-German Association, a Christian association. We have been organizing various Czech-German youth meetings, and some of it's got some religious elements as well, but there are lots of other things we're doing. But by all means, there is this spiritual element of it. And what bothers me is that in Europe we've got many populists who keep talking about Christian values. They think they know what Christian values are. You are a theologist, and I would like to ask you the following. What do you think this Christian heritage can give us in Europe? Can we get anything from it? We've got immigrants coming with different religions, but can we still build on religion in Europe? Thank you very much. I appreciate having Ackermann Foundation present in here. It's a great association, Czech-German friendship. Czechs and Germans who want to continue building fraternity amongst people. And I was talking about civil society, and if we start talking about religious questions, religious issues, it doesn't really matter whether I'm a Protestant or whether I'm somebody else. It's more about my attitude. If we feel that the link of Christians to God is linked to loyalty to democracy and the rule of law, then yes, we've learned it properly. And religions do develop. Christians had thoughts in the past that the only divine authority was God, then the king, and then nobody else, that they felt that that's what it was written in the Bible. And I don't think it's so. In Bible, I actually read about people who are free, who are equal. Then you've got the idea of human rights. What is it, human rights? The Christians maybe didn't understand it at the beginning. Isn't it running counter our traditions? You've got Catholics who were warning the public against human rights, but I don't have time to speak about them, unfortunately. Let's look at what religion provides to the society. Let's look at the history of religion. And I don't want to perceive it negatively only. That's what communists did. But let's look at what religion can provide to the society. Each person is a divine creature, and dignity is a very important word. We are told by Christians that we should love people who are close to us, and even people who are far away, but they still need our help. So there are elements in the religion which were civilizing people even before religion became formulated. Thanks to religious movements, we can see improvement now in interpersonal relationships. Loving people who are close to you, that's solidarity. Loving your neighbor, that's about solidarity. It's about the way of thought, in a way. God is an authority, and in the center of this authority you have living together in love. And that's very good, isn't it? Of course, we must realize that, and we must remember crusades and all other dark times in the history of Christianity. We must criticize these things, but on the other hand, we can look at religion and see what religion has given us. People being together, people loving one another. People are very precious individuals. People are individuals but living together. And if I want to be successful, I have to respect other people's dignity. And in our countries, Christian-oriented societies, I see foundations of political solidarity. For example, caring for the sick, caring for the elderly. You've had monks and nuns caring for them. But it was always about living together, being together. and also the gifts brought by Christians, and those are gifts we can still receive from Christians. And, you know, in my generation, I've seen even more. I've seen religious people being stronger than others in their beliefs for change. Religious people sometimes believe that change is welcome. They are stronger in their beliefs, and we all believed in the revolution, and the revolution came one day, and that's one of the elements we adopted from Christianism. But it doesn't mean that other people, non-believers, cannot have their beliefs. That's not true. Unfortunately, I don't have time to do that, but tolerance is the biggest value.
I think that Mr. President gave us a truly spiritual answer, and this should be the end of our discussion today. Thank you for your questions. Thank you, President, for your the open answers. I'm sorry we don't have time now, and it's only thank you for having you with us.
So, wo geht's jetzt hin?